looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today we're going to be talking about Brandon Aiyuk requesting a trade, what that ultimately means for him and the 49ers. Brock Purdy, per ESPN, ranked outside of the top 10 quarterbacks by NFL executives. I have thoughts there. CBS Sports naming the biggest do-over for each team, and they choose San Francisco's loss against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I have some thoughts regarding that. And then rookie training camp kicks off this week. We'll detail what I'm expecting from each of the rookies, including some select undrafted rookie free agents. There will be no plus content this week, so it's going to start and end with the Niners. So let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners.
So it was reported earlier today by NFL Network's Mike Garafolo that Brandon Aiyuk has officially requested a trade from the 49ers. The Niners have not apparently re-engaged in negotiations from this past May, where they offered Aiyuk $26 million annually. And Aiyuk is thinking more in line with the 4 years, $120 million that Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Lions got, which is obviously $30 million a year. So if that's the gap, $4 million, and of course, whatever the guaranteed money is going to be, there needs to be some sort of concessions or bridge that San Francisco is going to make. But let's take a step back in terms of the trade request. This is, to me, a tremendous nothing burger because San Francisco gave Aiyuk and his representation permission to seek a trade or put feelers out there around the time of the draft. So that was April, right? End of April. And there were talks then about the Steelers potentially being interested, the Patriots. Those are still teams today that were mentioned as teams that are going to reach out or have reached out to the 49ers about Aiyuk. So Aiyuk formally requesting a trade is honestly just the next page in the Diva Receiva I want to be traded playbook. Nothing more. Rookies are reporting to minicamp this week. Veterans are reporting next week, the week of July 22nd. So Aiyuk's camp is maybe trying to use this as some sort of a leverage play to get a deal done so Aiyuk doesn't miss any or really much of any training camp time. Now, what Aiyuk wants to get paid is in line with the top receivers in the league. And I'm going to go through this exercise later on when we talk about Brock Purdy, but let's just list off the receivers that we can agree, regardless of age, how much they have left in the tank. You know, this isn't a future-looking thing, but receivers right now that we can make a good argument are better than Brandon Aiyuk. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown. I'm going to throw Amon-Ra St. Brown in there because he's more versatile, can play in the slot and outside. And Mike Evans, who's on the downside of his career, but has had a ridiculously solid, whatever it is, 8, 9, 10 years where he's gone over 1,000 yards, each year playing with not ideal quarterback play for some of it outside of the Tom Brady years. So that's 8 receivers right there, right? And then you have a group that you could throw Aiyuk in terms of you have your arguments and discussions with other fans, other people, and the order can change. And this is not in my order of preference. This is just a listing. Someone like a Terry McLaurin, a DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, even though very early on, but had a really good season rookie year with the Rams. Both Seahawk receivers, DJ Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, Jalen Waddle of the Dolphins, Devontae Smith, and Amari Cooper of the Browns. That's, I think, in the Brandon Aiyuk ballpark. Again, ignoring age. This isn't a who would you take for the next 5 years. This is just as of today. And then you have young, ascending, very cheap receivers like Garrett Wilson of the Jets, Chris Olave of the Saints, and George Pickens of the Steelers, which I'm not saying you would necessarily take over Brandon Aiyuk. But if you want to play that hypothetical game of a couple years younger, still on a rookie contract, players just to throw into the mix. Now, I've been saying for weeks, I'm going to stay by this, and I think you guys are going to agree with this. In no way, shape, or form does a trade make San Francisco better this year. Even if they get a player back, chances are it's not going to be a receiver. It's certainly not going to be a receiver of Brandon Aiyuk's caliber. And if you want to say he's a top 10 receiver, maybe somewhere between 7 and 11 or 12 as a conservative range, I can get behind that. What they would get back is just draft pick compensation, I would imagine. A.J. Brown went for a first and another pick when he was traded to the Eagles. And I think if I'm John Lynch and San Francisco management, and I've said this before, I would want trade compensation that is commensurate to what Brandon Aiyuk thinks he's worth. All right, BA, you think you're worth $30 million average annually? Like a Tyreek Hill, like an Amon-Ra St. Brown? If those players were on the trade market, I've said this before, there would not be anyone hesitating to pony up the required package needed to acquire those players. And if it's true that Lynch gave Aiyuk and his representation the ability to request a trade around the draft, and it didn't happen, it was also reported that Washington was a team that could have traded for Aiyuk, and they balked at the 49ers asking price. And if I'm San Francisco, I'm going to ask for the moon and the stars. You always got to shoot higher than what you want. If you want a first and a third, you're going to ask for a first and a second, or 2 firsts, or a first, a fourth, and a player. Whatever that is to make the team come down to something more realistic. But John Lynch has already come out, or 49er representatives, announcing to teams they have no desire or they are not going to part ways with Brandon Aiyuk, which makes sense, right? It does not help the team this year. This and the next couple of years are going to be all in years for San Francisco. It's not a matter of reloading. It's a matter of retooling. Even if players like a Debo or a Javon Hargrave, Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga are gone next year for salary cap reasons or not performing up to a contract or whatever it may be. Can't pay everybody, right? Especially with Brock getting paid, although I still maintain the first couple of years of his new deal will be very reasonable. I'm going to call it the Trevor Lawrence contract blueprint, where the first couple of years of his extension would go no more than $25 million against the cap. You could work with that with a quarterback. And you could work with that with Aiyuk getting, top 7, top 8 dollar. And the other players, obviously, that, are getting big money, like a Kittle, like a Warner, Bosa, Trent Williams, etc. So San Francisco should hold out for, again, guys, they're not going to trade him. This isn't putting any leverage on, any pressure on San Francisco. This isn't a leverage play by BA. This is the last card he has to play other than holding out if it gets to it. He's not going to give up $14 million a year on his 5th-year deal of his rookie contract. He's going to want to make that money. That's 2, 3, 3.5 times as much as he made any year of his rookie deal. That's still, it's not $28 million. It's half of probably what he's going to get, but that's still a lot of money. And when it comes, to the money situation, is the grass greener, Brandon? If it's true that New England and Pittsburgh and Washington for sniffing around, these are go nowhere fast teams. Washington had a nice draft. I know they brought in Adam Peters and they're, kind of taking the 49ers maybe approach or model to things. New England is in a race for the number 1 pick next year. And Pittsburgh, where they're going to finish last in that division. These are teams that he may not see the playoffs for the next 2, 3, or 4 years if he gets traded. And I'm not going to say, hey, you should, you're in a good situation, BA. You should take less. I'm not going to put my hand, in another human being, another man's wallet. We're all going to be in that. We've all been in that situation, job-wise, where we get offered X amount more. Maybe it's a good opportunity. We can forward our career, grow, and you make the move. But then there's also situations where maybe where you are is a really good spot and an extra for us, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 maybe isn't worth the extra commute, the extra hours, the extra travel, whatever it may be. Does he want to play for playoff games and Super Bowls? Or does he just want to play for an extra, $750,000, $1 million a year? Which again, it's a lot of money. But for a lot of these players, it's about a ring too. And the teams that I listed, New England, Pittsburgh, and Washington, no chance. And I don't think San Francisco, out of spite, would send him to one of those teams. They're not going to send him anywhere anyway. Let me just, again, make it abundantly clear. But I don't think out of spite they would send him to a bottom feeder just to teach him a lesson. This seems like it's an organization that does well by its players. Trading a Jeff Wilson, releasing Eric Armstead, even though people say, oh, well, they lowballed him. Of course he wants out. Well, it's not the Niners' fault that he's been injury prone and he's on the wrong side of 30 and he's making way too much money for his productivity and availability. Niners have all the leverage. Niners have all the leverage. They could, if Aiyuk plays out on his fifth-year option, they can use a franchise tag in 2025 and 2026. Here's what the overall numbers would look like. We mentioned 2024, a little over $14 million. 2025 franchise tag would be almost $25 million. The 2026 tag, which is a 120% increase from 2025, would come out at almost $30 million. In sum, the average of those 3 years would be $22.9 million, which is, as we're doing the math at home, everyone, $3 million less annually than what the 49ers offered at $26 million. Now, the downside, if people are going to say, well, then just tag him. Well, who cares? You can control his rights. Yeah, but that doesn't behoove Aiyuk because he wants more long-term security and more money. And it doesn't behoove San Francisco because they're going to get nailed with a $14 million cap hit in 2024, almost 25 in 25, and almost $30 million in 2026. Can't amortize, can't spread it out. It behooves everybody to get a long-term deal. And, when you're looking at the top players, Jefferson averaging 35, Brown averaging 32, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown 30, Tyreek Hill 30. Then you're getting into the Brandon Aiyuk area. Jalen Waddle, 28.25. Devontae Adams, 28. Cooper Kupp, 26.7. Devonta Smith, 25. So they've already offered him more than Devonta Smith, which they should, since Devonta Smith is the number 2 receiver on the Eagles and Brandon Aiyuk's the number 1. They should offer him more than Cooper Kupp. That's an old contract. And to make it look good, little more than Devontae Adams and a little more than Jalen Waddle. And I think when it's all said and done, if he's asking for 30 annually and the Niners offer 26, you offer him 28 and a half, which puts him over Devontae Adams 28 and over Jalen Waddle's 28.25. Easy peasy. They should not lose. Well, they're not going to lose because the only way they lose Brandon Aiyuk is if he completely holds out, which he will not. He will not give up $14 million this year. And to show that he would be in the top 5 receivers. Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Tyreek Hill, then Brandon Aiyuk at $28.5 million. That's fair. No, I don't think he's the number 5, the 5th best receiver in the NFL. Not at all. Again, 8 through 13, fair. CeeDee Lamb gets his contract. Jamar Chase gets his contract. They're going to obviously leapfrog him. But again, those are 2 players that I think you or I, or anyone listening, would take over Brandon Aiyuk. Now listen, I'm not downplaying his importance to the team. He's a great route runner. He can separate. Yes, the entire team had difficulty beating man against the Ravens on Christmas night and against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. But in terms of his route win percentage, he has a 78.7% success rate versus man, which is the 96th percentile, an 83.6% success rate versus press, which is in the 97th percentile, and an 85.4% success rate versus zone, which is in the 91st percentile. He is valuable to what San Francisco does. He'd be valuable to really any team. He is valuable to what Kyle wants to do. He's not a chess piece that you can really move around like a Debo, like a McCaffrey, like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, even a Puka Nacua or a Cooper Kupp. among other receivers that can play more inside or out and outside. But how he complements what Debo does and Kittle, and how he grew in his first full season, the rapport he has with Brock Purdy. I get it. California is not a cheap state to live in. And players should go for every penny imaginable, and hometown discounts are few and far between. But making $1.25 million, $1.5 million less per year than you want to be on a perennial contender and get that ring that would solidify your legacy in the Bay Area with the Niners as maybe the next great 49er receiver, guys, they're going to come to a compromise. I think within the next 3 weeks, by the end of the first week, beginning of second week of August, I think this will be all put to bed. I don't think the Niners are that stubborn that they're going to let this drag out over what to me amounts to about $2 or $2.5 million more per year. In the grand scheme of things, that's peanuts. NFL executives, and I guess this was averaged or whatnot, since a bunch of NFL executives were interviewed to list out their top 10 quarterbacks, and Brock Purdy did not rank in the top 10. And by one executive, he was impressed by what Brock Purdy has done, but called him a system quarterback. Now, if that's the case, then someone like a Brian Hoyer, a CJ Beathard, Jimmy Garoppolo would have performed just as well as Brock Purdy did this past year. And since Purdy has come into the league in 2022, remember last year Purdy set the 49ers all-time passing mark, and even though it was a 17-game regular season, he only played in 16 games and ranked number 1 across many quarterbacking metrics. And let's also go back to, if it was such a friendly system, then why did someone like Trey Lance look so lost and flame out so badly and hasn't been able to win the backup role in Dallas as of yet? And that may change this offseason. Here are the top 10 quarterbacks that were ranked by NFL executives. Pat Mahomes, which I think we all can agree with at number 1. Then you can have your conversations moving forward. Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Matt Stafford, Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, and Dak Prescott. And 3 right off the bat that jump out at me and may jump out at you also in terms of being top 10. CJ Stroud at 7, 1 year, did not play the full year, got injured. Won their division, made the playoffs, and that was more of a collapse on the Jaguars' part and how bad the rest of the division was, really more than anything that the Texans did, and did not score an offensive touchdown at Baltimore. Got to see more than 1 year from CJ, not even a year, from CJ Stroud before you put him in the top 10. I think that's just a very level-headed way of looking at it. Jared Goff, all right, he had 2 good seasons in Detroit. So did Brock. Brock beat Goff head-to-head. Brock was an MVP finalist. Goff wasn't. Dak Prescott, very polarizing figure, a good very good quarterback in this league. Should he be top 10? I don't know, but those are the 10 that were listed. Now, the way that I went about doing this, and I already said I had my list where Brock, I would rank him somewhere between 8 and 13, or 8 and 14 or 15. I forget the exact number, which I think is fair for him. And that's where the conversations and the arguments that fans are going to have. Obviously, Niner fans are going to rank him higher than other fan bases. Other fan bases are going to rank their respective quarterback higher than other fan bases might. But let's agree on these 15 quarterbacks that I found that Purdy is automatically better than. Bryce Young of the Panthers, Derek Carr of the Saints, Daniel Jones of the Giants, Geno Smith of Seattle, Baker Mayfield of Tampa, Deshaun Watson of Cleveland, Anthony Richardson shown next to nothing so far in Indianapolis. Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, whoever the quarterback is, with the Raiders. Russell Wilson or Justin Fields in Pittsburgh. Will Levis in Tennessee. Caleb Williams, the Bears. Jalen Daniels of the Commanders. Drake May or Jacoby Brissett of the Patriots. J.J. McCarthy or Sam Darnold of the Vikings. And Bo Nix or Jarrett Stidham of the Broncos. Williams, Jalen Daniels, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, and Bo Nix are bottom 5 quarterbacks in the league until proven otherwise because they haven't played a snap yet. Anybody that's putting these quarterbacks above any other veteran, second or third year quarterback needs to slow their roll. I know they're doing that on promise and potential, and a lot of it is draft status. But they haven't shown anything yet. Any one of these 5 quarterbacks could be a bust right out of the gate, just not have the physical or mental wherewithal to play in the league. We have no idea. Yet, Jalen Williams drafted number 1, Jalen Daniels drafted number 2 means nothing. You know, that and 50 cents will get you a mini-sized bag of chips. So those are the 15 that I have immediately ranked behind Brock Purdy. Now, who's better? Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Matt Stafford, Justin Herbert, and Aaron Rodgers. Not necessarily in that order, other than Patrick Mahomes being the bona fide number 1. These are quarterbacks that, you know, maybe not long-term. Rodgers is 40 plus, Stafford's on the tail end of his career. But maybe for a season, execs would take, and I think even I would take, over Brock Purdy. Now, if you want to say that these quarterbacks don't fit Shanahan's system, remember they tried to get Matt Stafford, the Rams beat them to it. A running quarterback, Shanahan tried with Trey Lance, and people could say maybe they didn't give him enough of a try and injuries happened and Brock Purdy just took that job and never gave it back. But I'm sure Mahomes can play in this system, Burrow, Stafford, Herbert, Rodgers. And Shanahan, I think after that Bills game a couple of years ago, wanted someone built like a Josh Allen, and I think Trey Lance was the closest thing to that in the draft class in 2021. But these are 7 quarterbacks. I mean, you have future Hall of Famers, All Pros, Pro Bowlers, Super Bowl winners on here. So if that means best case scenario, Brock Purdy is 8th, okay, that's where I think we can maybe start the discussion. Now, there are 9 quarterbacks left in the NFL that I feel like are in the ballpark, that people could have conversations right near Brock, above, below. Kyler Murray of the Cardinals, Kirk Cousins of the Falcons, Jared Goff, Detroit, Jalen Hurts of the Eagles, Trevor Lawrence of Jacksonville, Tua Tagovailoa of the Dolphins, Love of the Packers, and Stroud of the Texans. Now, other than getting big contracts or being mobile or being in the league for more time than Brock Purdy, or that whole potential, Kyler Murray drafted high, Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence, Tua, CJ Stroud. The only one that really has a resume similar to Brock Purdy is really Jalen Hurts, and he was a second-round pick. Made the playoffs, each of his first 3 seasons. Bounced quickly in year 1 and year 3, but did make the Super Bowl his second year starting. Kyler Murray, what has he really shown? Kirk Cousins, again, a very good quarterback. Top 12, top 15 quarterback in the league, and there's nothing wrong with that. Goff and Dak might be there. Trevor Lawrence had a good game in that comeback against the Chargers. But he's had some talent to work with. And yes, he was burdened with Urban Meyer as a head coach. But was Urban Meyer really responsible for what the offense looked like as much as maybe the trigger man is? Tua, a lot of weapons around him. Just as many weapons, you could argue, as Brock Purdy, if not more, hasn't won a playoff game yet. Jordan Love won one playoff game against a very overrated Dallas team and threw 2 critical interceptions against the 49ers, in which Brock threw none. And hey, you want to say, well, Brock had a couple that could have been intercepted. Catch it, Packer defenders, just like Dre Greenlaw caught the 2 interceptions that Love threw, including the crucial you cannot do cardinal sin interception of rolling right, throwing across his body late, and intercepted at midfield on a drive where the Packers only needed a field goal to tie the game. And CJ Stroud, again, we haven't seen enough. We just haven't. So again, to me, Brock is somewhere around, say, 8 and 13, 14, or 15. Nothing wrong with that, guys. The Niners can win with that. They have won with that. They've gotten to a Super Bowl with that. The Super Bowl that Brock gave the Niners the lead late in the fourth quarter and in overtime, and possibly a win if the O-line were able to pick up 2 blitzes, one by cornerback Trent McDuffie, and the other, actually, I don't even know if it was a blitz. It was just Chris Jones coming free at him, and the Niners having to settle for field goals. Remember, if the Niners converted on that third down late in the fourth, they could have taken the clock all the way down to a potential game-winning field goal as time expired, but just did not come to it. I would say Niner fans, don't get riled up about this list. Does it matter? And I'm sure a lot of level-headed people that are listening to this, it doesn't matter to them, but it's more fodder for conversation and discussion about how good is Brock really. If you are an MVP candidate, a top 5, final 5 candidate, and some weeks of the regular season leading the MVP voting or the MVP frontrunner, you're doing something right. For all, as Peyton Manning, a Hall of Famer, maybe a top 5, top 7 quarterback of all time. Would it have looked different if he didn't have Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, Dallas Clark, Edgerrin James, Joseph Adai? Probably. I think the one that has obviously the best case of being the best all time, and it's Tom Brady. Think about the weapons he had to work with outside of 2007, outside of Randy Moss and Wes Welker, Dante Stallworth. And again, he did get Gronkowski later on, but he wasn't really working with household name offensive weapons like Mahomes has been, like Burrow has been, like Josh Allen has been. Lamar Jackson, they've tried to get him receivers, right? They've tried to bring in first-round picks and Odell Beckham and multiple tight ends, and this is a chicken or an egg type situation with him, right? Is it the receivers aren't good enough, or is Lamar Jackson not good enough to elevate the play of his receivers? Herbert's had Eckler and Allen and Mike Williams when healthy. And Rodgers, even though the Packers did not draft a first-round receiver, I think in Aaron Rodgers' entirety of his duration in Green Bay, still had quality players to throw to. Jared Goff, really good offensive line. Really good tight end, really good receiver in Amon St. Brown. And Dak Prescott has always had good weapons. And for a lot of years, a really good offensive line and good running game, and he hasn't been able to put it together in the playoffs. It's okay. Brock fits what Kyle wants to do. Now, maybe if ultimately Kyle still wants a dual threat like a Josh Allen, but he's getting that mobility, that maybe east-west mobility, not as much north-south, that Brock plays outside of structure, keeps plays alive. You saw it on display in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl. Where Purdy's ranked by others isn't nearly as important as how we feel about him as a fan base. And we know that he can get the 49ers to the Super Bowl. We know he can get the 49ers a lead late in regulation and in overtime in the Super Bowl. Just went up against Patrick Mahomes. You go up against the greatest of maybe this next generation, it's going to be tough to hold him down for all 60 or 75 minutes of this past Super Bowl. So now let's go from quarterback rankings to CBS Sports writer Brian DiArdo listed out his biggest ever do-overs for each team. And for San Francisco was this recent Super Bowl of the 49ers against the Chiefs and Kyle Shanahan deciding to take the ball in overtime. And I don't necessarily have a problem with this being a contender for biggest do-over, because the do-over is a choice, right? We're not going to say Roger Craig's fumble against the Giants in the 1990 NFC Championship game is a do-over, because that was a play that it wasn't a choice. It happened. Kyle Williams fumbling against the Giants in 2011. That wasn't a choice. You could say it was a choice putting Kyle Williams back there, but who else were they going to put? Fumbling in overtime, giving the Giants the field goal to go to the Super Bowl against the Patriots. This was a choice by Kyle Shanahan. And let me just lead off with the quote, and then we're going to dive into it. Quote, Kyle Shanahan surprised everyone when he opted to put his offense on the field to start the second overtime game in Super Bowl history. San Francisco managed to get a field goal on the drive, but then lost the game moments later when the Chiefs scored a touchdown in their ensuing possession. So a couple things here that, he's obviously not going to put in there because it would hurt his choice and credibility. The defense being gassed at the end of the fourth quarter. And don't think that, that rest between fourth quarter and overtime and commercial break would have been enough. No, it wouldn't have. It would have been nice to know what you needed to get, do you need a field goal to tie? Do you need a touchdown to tie, a touchdown 2-point version if you want to win? That would have been nice to know. And as it was happening, I was wondering, why wouldn't you? Heat of the moment, I think the reaction for all of us was, Kyle should have kicked off. Thinking about it more and hearing the reason why his decision was made, when you look at that whole game, the Chiefs did not drive the length of the field for a touchdown. Remember, their points came on field goals and a fumble on the punt return off of Darrell Luter's foot, in which the Chiefs scored from it was around the 20-yard line, inside the 25. I think they scored on the very next play. When the Chiefs had to go the length of the field, and they went close to the length of the field at the end of the fourth quarter, but had to settle for a field goal to tie, they were just getting field goals, right? So Shanahan thought, my defense is tired. This has been a game of field goals. Let's kick it off to KC. Best case scenario, we get a turnover and kick a field goal right there to win. Or we stop them, force a punt, and we get the ball. Or if they go down and kick a field goal, we want that ball third. Start off with it. Get points, kick a field goal. Chiefs get it. Niners get it third. So I've never been worked up about the decision, especially the way that I kind of thought about it more and how that game did unfold once you take yourself out of the emotion of it. Here's the problem I have with Brian DiArdo's decision. Quote, for a while it looked like Shanahan's gamble might pay off as the 49ers appeared poised to win the game on a walk-off touchdown, but after zipping to the Chiefs' 9-yard line, the 49ers offense had to settle for a field goal after failing to gain a yard on consecutive plays. Here's the issue, and you probably understand it as I read it. The 49ers appeared poised to, quote, win the game on a walk-off touchdown. That's blatantly false. Because of the Chiefs-Bills playoff game from a couple years ago that went to overtime, the NFL changed the overtime rule for playoffs, not Super Bowl, for playoffs, including Super Bowl, saying that even if the team that gets the ball first scores a touchdown, the other team gets a possession. So as many people that were mocking, Kyle Shanahan and the Niners, saying that they didn't know the overtime rule, they didn't practice it, this is someone 5 months later, 5.5 months later, does not know the overtime rule and using that for the basis of his argument, because it looked like Shanahan's gamble might pay off as the Niners appeared poised to win the game on a walk-off touchdown. Incorrect. And there is so much of this. This was actually an article on CBS Sports that I found through the 49ers WebZone website, which curates a lot of great content, podcasts and articles across multiple websites, in addition to a discussion board. But, being blatantly wrong here, if people aren't going to fact check him at CBS Sports, then Brian Diardo, and I'm going to refrain from calling you Brian Retardo because that just wouldn't be nice. I'll fact check you now. It's wrong, and it's so dangerous. Let's take it out of the sports realm just for a second. Obviously, what's going on now in the country with former President, Donald Trump, the assassination attempt, fortunately, just being shot, in the ear, regardless of your political leanings or how you feel about Donald Trump or anything or anybody, no one should be condoning assassination, obviously. And the fact that anybody has to come out and say that is a little bit silly, but that is the case. Last night, I was on either Twitter or Reddit, and there was a bunch of posts and pictures of Donald Trump standing next to his chosen VP. I'm blanking on the first name, but Vance. And the reason I remember that is from Bob Vance Refrigeration from the Office comedy series, but standing next to him and his right ear looking fine, just a little red. I'm looking at that going, that's, and there was multiple pictures of Trump on this thread or whether it was Reddit again or Twitter, and people commenting, see, it was a conspiracy, photoshopping, Trump holding up ketchup bottles or packets and that it was all staged, et cetera, et cetera. Why is Trump's ear okay at the Republican National Convention? It's staged. I wouldn't put Trump above this, blah, blah, blah. And instead of actually people searching images from the Republican National Convention, the RNC, they're just going along with what they're seeing online, and it's not true. And if anybody that watched it or saw pictures, Trump's ear was clearly bandaged. He was clearly shot. We'll see what his ear looks like, and I'm not meaning this as a joke, if it's going to look like Evander Holyfield's ear after, Mike Tyson bit it 20 plus years ago. Is there going to be, I'm sure there's going to be some sort of plastic surgery, reconstructive surgery, but you're going to see some sort of damage to the ear and that bandage or gauze wrapping, whatever he was wearing at the convention comes off. But people will not take the time to do research on their own, and they will blindly believe, especially when it comes to politics and sports to some degree, what is put in front of them, especially if multiple people are perpetuating a lie or an untruth. This was only one person, but again, 5 months later, Brian Diardo, you should know what the overtime rule is in NFL playoff games. Now, I'm not going to say that that's the biggest redo. Honestly, the biggest redo should have been the Super Bowl against the Ravens, where the Niners get the ball down to the 7-yard line, and they go run, pass, pass, pass. The last 3 passes being to Michael Crabtree. The first run being a run to Kendall Hunter, since Frank Gore came out after, a 30-plus, 35-plus yard run to set them up first and goal at the 7. So first down, if you don't remember, Niners hand it off to Kendall Hunter. They get a 2-yard gain to the 5. Then the 2-minute warning. So now, with a little bit of extra time, now you could say maybe Frank Gore is rested. Maybe you bring him in. Instead, on second down, Kaepernick rolls right, was looking solely for Crabtree the whole time, covered through incomplete. I hate rollouts when you're this close to the end zone, especially if a team is playing zone or you're not bringing someone in motion from left to right to maybe get that angle to the pylon, because you're ignoring 2/3 of the field. Third down looked like it could have been a designed run with Kaepernick, but Harbaugh called a timeout. Winds up being another throw to Crabtree, incomplete. And fourth down was the fade route to Crabtree, incomplete. The biggest do-over there is not having Gore in for a handoff at least once, right? Or having run-pass options with Kaepernick every play, or a broken play where Kaepernick drops back. If nothing's open, I'm sure the Ravens would have been spying on him, but Kaepernick still would have been faster than any one of the linebackers that the Ravens put out there. So some sort of option for Kaepernick, or not that we're forgetting the Niners had Randy Moss on the team, but to somehow set up your formation either with motion or something where you get Randy Moss one-on-one against one of the smaller corners. And the biggest corner that the Ravens had that year, I believe, was Jimmy Smith, who was covering Michael Crabtree on that last fourth down incompletion. Have whoever was not Jimmy Smith covering Moss one-on-one and throw him. I would even throw him 3 straight jump balls, even if one is on Jimmy Smith. He's 6'4". He's got the wingspan of a pterodactyl. You're telling me he can't go up if Kaepernick just puts it up? Like, let him just run, stop, throw him a jump ball. All would have been better plays than what the Niners put forth at the end of that game. Kudos to the Ravens defense, but the Niners have players, athletes, height, speed that they could have exploited against the Ravens instead of settling for what they settled for. And remember, Niner fans, you're going to hear people say, if the 49ers had done this, that, or the other thing, the 3 things I mentioned, they would have won the Super Bowl. Incorrect. Because the Ravens would have gotten the ball back with about a minute and a half left. The Niners defense played much better in the second half than the first half, holding the Ravens to 6 offensive points. Remember, one came on a kickoff return by Jacoby Jones, who unfortunately passed away earlier this week at 40 years old. Our thoughts and prayers, are with his friends and family. But revisionist history, it's obviously so easy, but there are things that are easy in the moment. Don't overthink it. You have one of the top 2 or 3 greatest receivers in NFL history who's taller than everybody else on that defense. Throw him a jump ball. Or you have the best athlete on the field in Colin Kaepernick. Let him run or make a decision with it. Or you have an absolute grinding machine at the running back position. Why not hand it to him after first down, maybe to get it closer to the 3 or the 2. And then you can even sneak it twice and try to get it in. That's the biggest do-over in 49ers history, at least maybe my years on this planet. There might be things from the 70s, 60s, 50s that people may want, but that, at least to me, would have been a more ownable or understandable choice that Brian Diardo, in all his glory, could have made. Now let's jump to training camp. Rookies are reporting to mini camps this week, veterans next week. And let's just quickly talk about what I'm expecting from rookies, in training camp. Let's start with the receivers, Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing. Now, the easiest thing, or the easiest path to playing time, would be punt returns. Can either Pearsall or Cowing be confident enough and reliable enough to be the starting punt returner, just so we don't have, we're not devoting a position or a player to that solely for that, like a Trent Taylor. Now, if Trent Taylor is wide receiver 6 and the Niners are rolling with Debo and Aiyuk and Jennings and Pearsall and Cowing ahead of him, listen, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I still think Ronnie Bell would have more utility as a long-term utility as a receiver than just having Trent Taylor as your punt returner. But Kyle Shanahan, obviously comfort level with certain people. Unless Pearsall or Jacob Cowing absolutely blows it away, Trent Taylor very well might make the 53. And people are coming out saying, well, Ricky Pearsall, do you want him as your punt returner? Why not? John Taylor was the Niners' number 2 receiver, starting receiver, and he was a punt returner for a handful of years. Pearsall's the number 4 receiver right now. Remember, guys, Debo or Aiyuk, they're not getting traded. Juwan Jennings is the number 3. Something else I would want to see out of Pearsall is how much playing time are you going to get? How many snaps are you going to take away from Juwan Jennings? I don't think you're going to really take away any from Aiyuk or Debo unless there's an injury. Then I think actually Pearsall gets significant playing time because, again, Juwan Jennings is not an outside receiver. He's a big slot. And Jacob Cowing, are you going to get some trick plays? Are they going to utilize even though your frame, you're not as big, Debo's got about 20 pounds on you. You can run sweeps. They can line you up in the backfield. They can throw you bubble screens. Can they get your skill set, your quick twitch, your stop start, your speed on the field, and maybe take that load off of Debo from time to time. Second round pick, Renardo Green, what is going to be your preferred position? I don't think you're going to be a starter. I don't, not yet. But are you going to be maybe the first backup behind Diamador Lenore in the slot, or behind Yadam or Rock Ya-Sin or Darrell Luter as the outside corner? Ambry Thomas is going to be gone. Dominic Puni, third round pick out of Kansas. Do you have a legitimate shot at winning the right guard spot? You're not going to be the right tackle. No one get confused. He played left tackle at Kansas the last 2 years, and he has guard experience. And he's played some right tackle also, but the best chance for him to win a roster spot is at right guard. And I don't think, not because he's a rookie, I think there's a continuity for the 5 players on the line: Williams, Banks, Brendel, Feliciano, and McKivitz, that the Niners want to leverage. If Puni doesn't win the right guard spot, does he bump Burford out as the backup? Are Barch and Puni your 2 interior offensive linemen? I think they will be. And I think they're going to go with 2 tackles, 2 pure tackles, Jalen Moore and maybe Chris Hubbard, as the backups at tackle. Running back Isaac Guerendo, where are you going to fall? Last week's podcast, I posed the question, or people are posing the question, do the Niners trade Eli Mitchell or Jordan Mason? I say no. And I say if Isaac Guerendo is the number 4 running back and is inactive on game days, doesn't mean he's a bust. He is a pick now if he gets his, learning the playbook, gets his feet under him, shows decisiveness, shows speed, shows good hands, shows pass protection, shows special teams ability to possibly bump Jordan Mason out of the number 3 running back spot, because Eli Mitchell is the number 2. He has Shanahan's comfort level. Safety Malik Mustafa. Are you going to be safety 3 or safety 4? Are you going to be safety number 2? Are you going to start if Talanoa Hufanga is not ready to start? We saw some pics. If you saw some pics online of Mustafa working out with his shirt off, the guy's, built like a Greek god. He's a ball or balls of muscle. We know he can tackle. Can he cover? Can he play that Tashawn Gibson role in time? But if Hufanga's not ready to go, is it going to be Mustafa? Is it going to be George Odom? Or do the Niners bring in somebody, a veteran off the street? It's not going to be Justin Simmons. I highly doubt, just the money that would cost, that would eat into their cap this year, that would roll over for next year. I just don't see it being a real possibility unless Hufanga has such a setback that he goes on IR for the whole year. And if that happens early in camp, then you can see that. Because they would only have 3 safeties. It's not going to be Taylor Hawkins. It's not going to be Jalen Mahoney. It's not going to be Eric Harris. That's not a viable person to have as either your starting safety or one of your immediate backups. Tatum Bethune, 7th round pick out of Florida State. Are you going to show enough to stick around as linebacker 5, or are you going to be on the practice squad? And I think being on the practice squad, there's no shame in that. You're a 7th round pick. I don't want to say not that much is expected of you from a team that has Brock Purdy on its roster. But this could be a good pick if he stays on the practice squad, if he's worthy enough, first of all, to stay on the practice squad all season. That could be a good depth piece for next year. And in terms of the undrafted rookie free agents, Tanner Mordecai. There was some buzz from Larry Krueger because, any one of these quote-unquote well-known content creators, if you throw enough shit against the wall, at some point you're going to be right. If you say 15 ridiculous things and one of them hits, you're going to claim, I was the one that said that Tanner Mordecai is going to make the 53. He's not making the 53. Is he going to be good enough to be on the practice squad maybe instead of Brandon Allen? Because I think the way that the Niners are shaping up at receiver, at cornerback, and maybe another position where they might want to carry or go a little heavier, that they can't go 3 quarterbacks. It's going to be Dobbs and it's going to be Purdy. So where does Tanner Mordecai end up? Is it the practice squad? Same with Drake Nugent. He's not making the 53, guys. As many people that might love Michigan football out there or think he was such a gem and a steal. He was undrafted for a reason. Doesn't mean he can't play, but he was undrafted for a reason. 32 teams passed on him at least 7 times. We're offensive line, and the center position is pretty important. Does he show enough to stick on the 53? I think he will. Mason Pline, the rookie out of Furman, not going to make the 53, especially now with Logan Thomas. But is he good enough? So new to football, just playing for a couple of years. He's got, good size, needs to learn to block, not fast, needs to learn how to run routes better, needs to work on hands. Is he going to be Ross Dwelly Part 2? Which is, if that's the case, that's not bad for an undrafted rookie free agent. He's just not going to be on the roster this year. Cody Schrader out of Missouri, self-made. I'm rooting for him, man. I really am. But I'm not rooting for him over or taking a spot from, obviously, McCaffrey, Mitchell, Mason, or Guerendo. Injury happens and he bumps up, say to Mason or to Guerendo, and he becomes number 4. That would be awesome. What a great story. Self-made running back, walk on to Missouri, 1,600 yards last year. He's a grinder. Not super fast, but can pass protect, has some decent hands. I think he'll be on the practice squad. Nevin Anderson out of FAU, the biggest D tackle they have from a weight standpoint. They gave him a nice signing bonus, $200,000+ or guaranteed money. I think he will stick around, and he could challenge for the number 5 D tackle spot if the Niners go 10 D linemen. Right now I have them with 5 DNs and 4 D tackles. If they go 5-5, Anderson could be on the 53. But again, these are players that I think will be on the practice squad with, and the biggest question marks are Mordecai and Pline right now. But exciting that Niner players are getting back on the field. I'm sure there's going to be, numerous reports on how the rookies are looking through rest of week. Everyone, let's take that with a grain of salt. It's not really going to matter. Veterans reporting next week, and we'll obviously have another podcast next week before veterans kick off or veterans attend, and I'll have my players to watch, position battles to watch, and what I'm expecting. Even though I gave my 53-man rundown a couple weeks ago, we'll still be talking about how things are going to shake out and depth at certain positions. So that concludes the 49ers podcast for this week. Like I mentioned, no plus section content, but next week there will be, whether we're reviewing the conclusion of Star Wars The Acolyte, Amazon Prime's The Boys, Netflix Receiver Show, which I just started watching with my son. We're 2 episodes in. There will be more to talk about, including veterans reporting to training camp and what my expectations are for certain players or position groups regarding the depth that the 49ers now have. So whatever you are doing between now and then, be happy, be healthy, and stay safe. Thank you for listening. We will talk soon. Take care.